Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar. What if I gave you guys 35.4 million US dollars right now? What would you do with that money, okay? Don't shut up the comment sections. That was a joke. I can only imagine what you guys would do. But at the end of the day, what if I told you over the weekend you guys were just chilling out, playing video games, having a good time? There was a near $100 million theft of people's Bitcoin. Now, I'm somebody that, like, if I ever tell you about, like, my history with Bitcoin, when I started deep web browsing, I remember coming across Bitcoins and I was like, you know what? I think I'll just buy I'll just buy, like, coins every so often, right? Like, I would upload a deep web video, I'm like, yeah, let me get some coins here. The reality of it is Bitcoin is a digital currency that has actual value, okay? If you look at Bitcoin to USD right now, when we looked at Bitcoin back in the day, Bitcoin started off, if you ever look into the max life cycle, probably around the time that I was doing like deep web browsing, shit used to be like hundreds of dollars, right? And actually it was substantially cheaper actually when I did really start like dark web browsing, right? But now that number has jumped up and it peaked out at one point at around $122,000. So for people buying here, they made a really pretty penny around here and a really, really good penny around here. Now, the thing is, people use this stuff to like kind of, offset the natural fiat currency. It's like, hey, I don't trust the banking system. I don't trust big government and my money. So let me move it into a place that I wholly own myself. I think Bitcoin has a lot of value. I think when you look at things like Monero and the privacy attached to it, there's a lot of value. But when it gets stolen, oh boy, does it hurt. And honestly, in today's day and age where everyone needs you to like give your identity in order to even purchase and transact and move Bitcoin around, without you going to like shadier non-KYC exchanges, sometimes you might ask yourself the question, is it really worth losing millions upon millions? So these are some accounts that have 25.1 million USD in certain cases, 5.6 million in certain cases. So this money has actually been stolen. And you might be like, whoa, what happened? Did some like exchange get hacked? No, some people bought a wallet known as a Coldcard. And this Coldcard wallet actually ended up having one little exploit in it that somebody found and used it to steal from over 1,000 of these bad boys, okay? So just a quick understanding, when you look at what a Coldcard is, these are basically like Bitcoin hardware wallets, right? So a hardware wallet, to give you an idea, you can either store your money on like a big crypto exchange, or you can purchase yourself one of these like wallets and you can store them on the actual wallet, throw it into a safe, kind of forget it until you actually need it down the road. Unfortunately, this Coldcard had a exploit in it that, despite all of their actual like security hooplas, everything they talk about, it's more than a hardware wallet. It's secure. It's got BIP85. It's got seed vaults. It ended up getting people's accounts hacked and their crypto money siphoned. And you might be like, well, can they get that money back? I don't know, maybe. It probably will take forever, though. A lot of people actually did end up losing a fair bit of money into it. In fact, if you go to the old Bitcoin community over here, they're not exactly having a great time, ladies and gentlemen. For instance, this person was like, full panic, one of my wallets was fucking drained. So you can see right over here, wallet is actually goddamn drained. One person was like, I'm so scared of this hack, I'm gonna move my whole stack of Bitcoins, all of my life savings, putting it into Bitcoin, to a scammy Wasabi wallet on the App Store. And unfortunately, this wallet also got their money stolen. Look, I don't want to sit here and laugh at somebody's like kind of misfortune over here, but I really do think that, again, if you are in the world of cryptocurrency or Bitcoins in general, you probably should abso-fucking-lutely understand what you're actually getting into, okay? This stuff really relies on you being knowledgeable with things like code and whatnot, and understanding, how you're storing your currency to begin with, right? Remember, in the digital world we live in, everything has a fucking exploit. So how the fuck was Coldcard actually hacked, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I have an actual, like, announcement from the fellas, CoinKite, the people behind this, okay? I don't actually expect their company to be functioning anytime later. I feel like the amount of, the shock that people have had, if you've lost serious money on this, I doubt anybody's gonna go and buy. I would never buy a Coldcard after what I'm about to read to you today, okay? So basically, they said that ultimately, at the end of the day, funds controlled by a seed generated on Mark II and Mark III versions, 4.0.1, so March 2021, by the way, okay? 2021 through 4.1.9 inclusive are at risk if the seed was created without at least 50 fair, independent, private dice rolls and the funded wallet is not protected by a strong BIP39 passphrase, okay? So all the caveats aside, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you decided to not use all these security features, well, updating the firmware even now does not change or repair existing seeds. If your seed was generated before the fixed firmware version, follow the migration guidance below, unless the Independence Dice Entropy exception rules apply to you. So all of this complicated shit aside, what ended up being the key problem? So anyways, there were a fair amount of researchers that looked into this stuff too. I believe people from like Square, for instance, looked a little bit deeper into this and found that ultimately the actual threat lied at some point back 5 years ago. To go back to that code I showed you 5 years ago, they basically disabled the hardware RNG, as you can see right over here, micro-P, and then there's number 0 right over here thrown in. So they disabled that version right there. So then the next bit of code comes into the situation over here, where ultimately it needs to get a hardware TRNG. So again, ultimately what happened over here, again, just to simplify that code or at least explain it, was that ultimately that code basically verifies, specifically if in def, that a macro exists, not to reject a macro whose value is necessarily 0, right? According to, again, even the research over here as well. So at some point in their seed Python script, they started to implement seed equals random bytes 32. So again, this is where the possible regression was kind of talked about in the community. This is where people kind of pointed at, which appears to resolve to the Yasmarong fallback rather than their actual hardware random buffer. So again, all of this stuff aside, to explain effectively what's been going on, the random number generator inside the actual cold cards that were being exploited were deterministic. So all things aside, let me explain it to you as simple as I can. When you use like a password manager, how do you think the password manager works? Well, before we get into that, I'm going to ask you a question right now. Think of a random number in your head between 1 to 100. I'm sure every single person watching this video probably came up with something different, right? Some of you watching probably thought 24. Some of you probably thought 37. Some of you probably thought 67. Some of you probably thought 84. And some of you probably were like, I'll be cheeky and go 82.1, right? You probably added decimals to the mix, right? So ultimately what's going on is everyone's kind of wired a little bit differently, right? Everyone's brain sort of pops up off in a different direction. Well, how do you think a computer works that way, right? When you're working with like password generators, at the end of the day, one of the things that is most important is entropy. And entropy is effectively the randomness that your computer sort of generates. So to give you a quick visual understanding of this, right? This is a simple piece of C++ code that I just whipped up right now. So effectively what it's doing is in this main function, it's basically querying the random device. Basically what it's effectively doing is it's going to the platform-specific, non-deterministic random number generator. So ultimately, at the end of the day, when I ask this program to generate a random number in this case, as you're going to see right here, it'll come up sometimes with this number. And then of course, if I do it again, it should be wholly different. And it should keep being different every single time I query this, right? So you might be like, how does the computer come up with this random number generation? Well, at the core of every single system is an entropic table. Now, since I'm running a Linux system, what happens is as I use my computer, as I write files to my computer, as I move my mouse, as I type stuff on the keyboard, in the background, an entropic table is being generated, modified, and it's basically adding to a random mix of data. That data can then be pulled for cryptography functions like password generation or things of that nature, right? Because it's a purely unique random space on every one system. In theory, when you're generating passwords, you actually have real, true randomness based on every single user. The problem with these Coldcard wallets, and the best way to explain it, is that they weren't using random entropy. They were using deterministic entropy. So effectively what happened here is a bunch of hackers found the actual space, they found the entropic tables, they found the entropy, they found basically what they could use to effectively generate the seed phrases for crypto wallets, right? These seed passwords and so on and so forth. And then they used that, and then they basically ran it up against the public Bitcoin unspent transaction output, which is the UTXO. So through this, they were basically, again, because it's freely accessible, it's not like they're being rate limited. They can really just spend the weekend throwing the phrases they generated and seeing which one works, across the board. And through this, once hackers realized that this was an exploit they could abuse, they started to go down the list and just extracting money from every single wallet that they could find. So even if you put your, cold card into a, safe and you never connected it to the internet, right? Like you went really safe with it, these guys were still able to grab your information and sort of pull it off. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's actually one of the largest heists that I could see on Bitcoin. And the reality of it is that money has been moved off, okay? So again, if we look at the actual Bitcoin here, men lie, women lie, the blockchain never fucking lies. And you can see right over here, 35.5 million in this wallet, 25.1 million in this wallet, 5.6 million in this wallet. So clearly you've seen that nothing has actually left the wallet, so to speak, over here. Nothing is actually blown away. Now, I don't know how true that necessarily is, because one of the people looking into this, Alex Thorne, found, and according to him, apparently there was about 30 Bitcoins. A victim here who actually had 17 Bitcoin peeled over was sent to Thorchain, then to Ethereum, and then it was transported to a goddamn Duel.com casino. So yeah, of course, the typical suspects in this case in these kind of stories sort of show up. But again, ultimately, both the victim and the researcher emailed all the known addresses for this casino asking for a freeze. Now, from what I understand, Duel.com actually moved the money, but they are actually being 100% compliant from what I hear. But ultimately, it is wild to see, again, that all this money, it's already kind of, I guess from here, starting to see some movement, which is an important point to make here, because ultimately, at the end, that's the ultimate goal. It's stealing the crypto, and then it's kind of moving it off. What's really interesting about it is you can kind of see people throwing in money into this stuff too, which I wouldn't really interact with because this whole thing has become sort of a forensic record, if you will, too. So you can see one person is just advertising BTC to XMR, and you can see some people seeing, again, ending my life tonight if you do not give me back what I worked 12 years for, okay? So again, ultimately, the end of the world, this is some pretty serious shit. Again, the problem when I cover some of these crypto things is that it's kind of funny to sort of see the hack, but at the end of the day, this is real people's money. And you can see that in certain cases. I don't know if this is a true thing or not, but this person may end up, I hope not, leaving the fucking world here because of this kind of shit. One person's like, I was born poor and I will die poor. I'm too incompetent for anything beyond sending an OP return message. Fuck my life. And of course, the more and more you keep going down, the harder this whole situation becomes, right? It's like, you stole, please return some. We can collaborate. Not for the thief. Our members stay safe. Foo. Here you can see somebody actually exercising their services, advertising it for people. I clean Bitcoin. I do KYC and cash out. I take 10%. I mean, that's a pretty good launder rate, dude. I don't even think Scarface can pull that fucking shit off, too. At the end of the day, what's going to happen with this money, ladies and gentlemen? Is this money going to be stuck in Bitcoin hell forever? To be honest with you, I don't know, okay? Generally speaking, stealing the Bitcoin isn't really that big of a... I mean, it's a big deal. But I think in history, when I've seen people get caught doing this, it's usually when this money starts to get taken out, because now everyone's eyes are on the system. The problem is, Bitcoin theft is kind of like, imagine robbing a bank, right? You rob the bank, you get away with it, but everyone knows where the safe house is, right? Everyone knows where the money is stored. So now everyone knows every entry point to that safe house. So anytime you think, okay, out of this whole thing, maybe I'll take out $1,000. You can take out 1,000, you can take out 10,000, you can even take out a fucking million. The thing is, people are going to know where every penny goes to. So really, the ways that these people are kind of going to be able to do this is probably through Bitcoin mixing services. So, mixing some of this illegal money with legal transactions and sort of obfuscating the chain right there and then. I don't know how effective that's going to be because, again, we're looking at $100 million stolen, guys. At this point, law enforcement hasn't actually said anything about this. But the reality of it is that I'm sure the FBI, the RCMP, every single agency is probably looking into this. There's even been talks of class action lawsuits against people like, Coldcard, against the company behind it, because maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't have had like a software engineer write something and post it into GitHub or send a commit 5 years ago, which threatened everyone going into the future, right? So again, ultimately, the end of the day, I think what's important about this is when you're dealing with things like Bitcoin, you got to be smart about this shit, okay? You really, really have to be smart about this. Because ultimately, if you don't know what you're doing, if you think, hey, I'll buy like a Bitcoin, I'll store it, and I don't really understand the security involved with this, then you're kind of screwing yourself in this entire process. And what's interesting about it too is that obviously people like Crypto Guide back in 2023 made videos talking about the actual dangers of these dice-based seeds and these private keys. Again, this was talked about in 2023. The fact that it happened now, the fact that it happened in 2026, bro, maybe we all just kind of knew. Maybe we all knew. People are like, this is the prophet. Bro literally called it. Bro predicted it. Aged extremely well. And ultimately, the money is still gone. So you might be like, how did the person figure out that this was actually done through, how did the hackers maybe do this? And there's been a lot of discussion that maybe this was LLM orchestrated. So maybe, just maybe, somebody found a way to use LLMs to identify this exploit and then actually use that identification and create the exploit down the road, right? So again, Alex Thorne over here, who researches this shit, is like, yeah, it's probably LLM orchestrated. And again, this is just like somebody throwing out a hypothesis, right? There have been people on the Bitcoin, Reddit over here, for instance, who have shown that Claude was basically pointing this stuff out after 8 minutes. And I'm sure Claude did this because it also looked online for all the chatter happening about this and basically worked its way. But not to say LLMs can't look through code and identify security issues. It's been a huge deal. There have been actual bug bounties that have been overflown because people keep throwing code into LLMs and effectively asking it to audit for it. And I guess LLMs find some pretty decent exploits. Unfortunately, in this case, it's a day late and a dollar short, right? Because the money has effectively been stolen. And even if you do patch some of these cold cards, depending on how your wallet was made, unless you make a new wallet and quickly move your money off to it right now, it's on the path of getting completely stolen, right? And that number, it has jumped up to 4,500-ish something addresses, okay? So a bunch of individuals who probably put their money into this entire stuff. People like Jonathan Goodman, who put a $1.6 million was drained after this wallet hack. Their keys were stored safely in a deposit box that was never connected to the internet. Well, there it is. All of that money gone. About $1.6 million Canadian, okay? So yeah, it's pretty fucked up, man. It's pretty wild. Now, he's filing a police report, and here's the thing. Maybe it'll work. Maybe something will happen, but my experience with law enforcement over here is you file the report, but I don't really see any follow through. And I don't think this person probably will get his money back. Unfortunately, what we've just witnessed is probably, I would say, one of the biggest crypto heists that has ever really just happened. And it's not that an exchange got hacked. It's because really shitty security practices were found out by a few people who were like, oh shit, I think we found out how to steal money without even connecting to these wallets. And so basically they just figured out an entire range of where to attack. They attacked it, they got money, and now they're probably going to get away with it. Think about it like this, okay? Imagine there are people who are professional criminals, right? And you know, when they do like a score, $100 million, like that's like a fucking heist of a lifetime, you know? It's like that's like a Union Depository from like GTA 5. You rob that shit once, you're set, okay? These people committed arguably a fucking grandiose theft, something that is the dream of professional criminals. Now the question remains is, can they get away with it? Can they move this money off and get away? Only time will tell on the next episode of Dragon Ball Z. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.